know who God says I am, where He says I am, what He says I am.
Because Jah shall wash away all the tears from my eyes. In times when the storm and in time of raging high, we know we shall win. Yeah, we know we shall survive. Yeah. Jah shall wash away all the tears. Ooh, we know we must win the fight. Yeah, when the wicked come and eat upon our flesh, yeah, we know that He's the pace of our trials and tribulation. We say Jah shall wash away all the tears from my eyes. In times when the soul and in times of raging high, we know we shall win. We know we shall survive. Jah shall wash away all the tears. I want us to just hold the hand of your neighbor. Just hold the hand of your neighbor. If you love them, hold the hand of your neighbor and raise it high like this. Raise the hand of your neighbor high. And I just want us to confess to them that Jah is going to wipe away their tears. Are we ready? Are we ready? Are we ready? 1, 2, 3. Because Jah shall wash away all the tears from my eyes. In times when the storm and in time of raging high, we know we shall win. We know we shall survive. Yeah. Jah shall wash away all the tears. Because Jah shall wash away all the tears. Help me sing again. Jah shall wash away all the tears. Rockers. Yeah.
Good morning, Mashariki.
Morning.
Welcome to the last Sunday of September. My name is Pastor Emmanuel.
And my name is Zippy. Zippora.
Yeah.
I like it when it's zippy. It's more modern.
Watoto wa siku hizi. Swag nayo. The month has come to an end.
I know.
And there's more.
There's
Next
more,
month.
definitely.
What is in store for us next month?
It's going to be a new sermon series.
Yes.
And I'm sure everyone will just, you know, after knowing what the title of the sermon series is, everyone will be excited. You just, you know, you just can't wait to come to church on Sunday. So how about you tell us about that?
The sermon series is entitled The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. What? What?
What?
Somebody say what? What? Oh, come on, say it with some swag. Don't leave me hanging over here. Say what?
Okay, so...
So here's a video just telling us a little bit about the series.
Wow. Only at Mavuno Church. A League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. You don't want to miss that. Talk to your cousins, your nephews, if you are a man or you appreciate men or you want to understand men, you need to be in this sermon series for the next 1 month. It's going to be amazing. We want to jump into our conversation today, but because we have some of us who were not in for all the services and some of us who visited with us today, allow me to do a little recap of the past 3 Sundays. The first Sunday we began this conversation of #Unanswered. We visited the life of a gentleman called John the Baptist, who was had been imprisoned, and in prison he was hoping that Jesus Christ could come through for him and help him kind of jailbreak or something, I don't know, pull off a miracle. But Jesus snubbed him. Jesus did not visit him. Jesus went silent, gave him a blackout. And we asked ourselves, what do we do when God is inattentive or when God is silent? We said, you know what? When God is silent, we must trust that he has a plan for us and that he still has us in mind. And we must understand that the circumstances we are in when God is silent are not a reflection of what God feels about us. And we must also come to the place of trusting his plan for us even when things don't make sense, instead of trying to make him fit into our plans because he's too big to fit in our plans. But then the second Sunday we visited with the life of another gentleman, a giant in the New Testament by the name of Apostle Paul, who was also in prison. And he had done so much for God. He had served God in ways that probably all of us combined may never be able to serve God like that. I mean, he had done major things for God. But then he was in prison. But on top of that, he had a sickness. He had a condition. And the Bible calls it a thorn in the flesh. And he pleaded with God, please heal me. But the Bible tells us that God responded, but instead of healing him, he said, I'm not going to heal you, but I'm going to give you grace to bear with that condition. And we said, when God says no, we love it when Jesus says yes. Nobody can say. But when Jesus says no, what to do? In the story of Paul, we learned when Jesus says no, then we must learn to lean on the grace. Because when he says no, he does not leave you like that. He supplies grace. We must learn to lean on the sufficient grace that he gives us, because God told Paul, my grace is sufficient for you. And then sometimes that place of God saying no to us leaves us vulnerable, leaves us in a difficult situation, leaves us in a place of weakness. We said in that story of Apostle Paul that sometimes that place of weakness could very well be a setup for God to do amazing things in our lives, because God's power can become perfect in that place of weakness in our lives. And lastly, last Sunday, we hung out with a family of 3, tight-knit family, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. And in fact, the Bible calls Lazarus the one whom Jesus loved. I mean, they were tight with Jesus. They had this thing going on between them and Jesus. I mean, they would, direct message each other on Twitter. I mean, they were in the same WhatsApp, group on Twitter, on WhatsApp. And in fact, Jesus would retweet, Lazarus' tweets every now and then. They were tight. But then when Lazarus fell ill, Jesus did not show up. In fact, when Lazarus went to HDU, Jesus did not show up. When he went to ICU, Jesus did not show up. When he died, Jesus did not show up for the funeral arrangements. They call them wakes in English. See Mashakaya, they call them wakes. Jesus did not show up for any wake. Very funny. Mashakaya seems authentic. And then he dies, and then he's buried rather. And Jesus did not show up for the burial. Then Jesus shows up 4 days after the burial. Somebody say Makatas. How can you call yourself my friend and you can't show up even for my burial? We said, you know what? When God is late, because Jesus showed up late, when God is late, we must understand several things. When God seems late, we must never allow our faith to remain stuck in what we thought God would do for us. We must never allow our faith to remain stuck. We must never allow our faith to be limited by those things that we hoped God will do for us. And by Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead, he was sending a powerful message that, hey, even when I seem late and things move from bad to worse, I have so much power that can go beyond where your faith has reached and get to your situation and bring it back. Because when Jesus said, Lazarus, I tell you, so many things happened. You know, the worm that had eaten, you know, Lazarus's flesh that had sneaked out of the grave and had been, you know, eaten by a rat, which had been, you know, eaten by a snake, and the snake had been eaten by a cat. When Jesus said, Lazarus, the cat, you know, had to give up the portion of the snake it had eaten, and the snake had to give up the rat, and the rat had to rush back and deliver the worm, and the worm had to rush back and deliver the flesh it had eaten from Lazarus. I don't know where your situation has gotten to. Oh dear. Anyway, that was not the point. Today, we want to look at another bunch of people. And it's an interesting bunch of people. But as we look at them, we want to explore moments when God, yes, at least he comes through, but he comes through not in the way that we had hoped he will come through. I mean, for example, you've been praying, Sister X has been praying and trusting God for a husband. And has even told God the kind of husband she wants. Tall, dark, and handsome. And then God comes through not in that way. Sends a short, I don't know what's the rest. Okay, guys who are short, God bless you. Is it vertically challenged? And you know, God, all the guys who are vibing you are not the height that you are looking for. What do you do when God doesn't respond the way he comes through, but not the way you were hoping he will come through? I mean, all the jobs that are coming through are not the kind that you like, and you've been trusting God and, you know, putting in applications. See, sometimes God seems to have a mind of his own. And that can be frustrating. I mean, it looks like sometimes you've prayed, it even gets worse, and things look like they have begun to work. That sick person looks like they have begun to get healed. They have begun to look better. And then kaboom! They fall back into, they relapse and things begin to be worse again. And you're like, God, what's going on? What's going on? And you've been praying for your business and it looks like it has begun to peak. Yeah. And then Kanjo comes and closes it down. For no apparent reason. And it doesn't make sense. And sometimes when we walk with God and we are trusting God for things, it seems like it makes us to oscillate between it's happening, it's not happening. It's happening, it's not happening. And sometimes these moments leave us wondering and thinking, God, why is it that sometimes it's so difficult to get you to come through for us? Why is it that sometimes it has to involve a lot of drama? I mean, for you to come through for us. Why is it sometimes it's almost like you always want us to sit at the edge of our seat, waiting on you to do something for us? Now today we want to hook up with some characters who will help us to begin to figure out how to behave when sometimes God waits until we have come to the end of the rope before he comes. When God waits until we are about to throw in the towel, then he shows up. But let me say something about that probably sometimes God allows us to come to that point and to go through that roller coaster of feelings because he wants to teach us one or two things. Because sometimes at that place where we are sitting on the edge, that's a place where he has a lot of our attention. And I must say this, that Such moments are not there, have not been set up by God with the intention of destroying us. I mean, his intention is not our destruction, but for us to learn, as we will see in today's conversation. The cast in today's conversation is made up of 12 characters. Somebody say 12. These are the disciples of Jesus Christ. And by the time we are meeting with them, they had just come from an episode of Jesus doing some amazing miracles. In fact, prior to where our story will begin, Jesus had just pulled off one of the most phenomenal miracles that he had ever pulled off. And you know what? If he pulled off that miracle in a certain part of this country, I'm telling you, people would just love Jesus the more. Because this miracle involved bread. I'll not say which part of the country. I mean, in this miracle, Jesus had just been able to feed. And by the way, it involved a logistical nightmare, because it involved 5,000 men, not counting women and children. And then Jesus tells his disciples, come on, let's feed these people. And there is no shop around. There is no, T-Mall or, Greenspan Mall around. I mean, they are out in the wilderness. And the disciples are like, hey, Jesus, are you for real? In fact, when they perused around, all they could get from, the people who were there was 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. And they're like, this is all we have. And Jesus says, yes, we're going to feed people with that. Are you nuts, Jesus? But then Jesus pulls it off, and 5,000 men, not counting women and children, are fed. And then after such an amazing miracle, Jesus instructs his disciples. He says, guys, let's take a little break. Actually, there was some sea in the nearby region. It says, you guys can go to the sea, I think it's the Sea of Galilee or something, and get into your boat and cross over. I'll catch up with you on the other side of the sea. Meanwhile, Jesus is left behind, dismissing the crowd, and they're coming back to him. They're saying, asandem no, for the bread. Oh, sorry, I've just, and they are excited, for all that. And so Jesus retreats to some hillside, some cave in some mountain there for prayer. Meanwhile, his disciples have set off sail in the sea. And they have done this in obedience to Jesus' instruction. But then guess what? The moment they start sailing, the sea decides it has no appetite for anyone sailing. And a storm begins to rise. Winds begin to blow. But then Jesus had told them to cross over. I guess probably at that moment they began asking themselves, guys, are you sure Jesus told us to do this thing? And that time it's about 6 o'clock in the evening. Are you sure? Are you sure he has not just sent us on a suicide mission? And let's read from verse 24 of Matthew 14 and begin to appreciate what was going on in this story. Matthew 14, verse 24. It says, meanwhile, the disciples were in trouble, a little distance away from the land, about 4 miles from the land. For a strong wind had risen, and they were fighting heavy waves. About 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus begins to come towards them, walking on water. And when the disciples saw him walking on water, they were terrified. In fear, they cried out, "A ghost!" You remember Casper the Friendly Ghost? You remember that? "A ghost!" I mean, you imagine, you've never seen anyone walking on water. And then you see a character, Jesus, the way he looks holy with white gowns. That's the way Hollywood has taught us. And he's walking on water. Even if it's me, man, I would reorganize my position in the boat. A little far from, so that ghost can eat others before it gets to me. But then Jesus says, hey, hold up. It is I. Verse 27. Don't be afraid. Take courage. I'm here. Then Peter called out to him, said, Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you, walking on water like you. Then Jesus said, come. And so Peter went over to the other side of the boat. I think he had gone to the other corner where I would have gone to. And then he stepped out and began to walk on water towards Jesus. But when he saw the strong wind and the waves, he was terrified and began to sink. Save me, Lord, he shouted. Jesus immediately reached out and grabbed him. You of little faith, Jesus said. Why did you doubt me? When they climbed back into the boat, the wind subsided, and the disciples worshipped him. You really are the Son of God, they exclaimed. May God bless the reading of his word. I want to highlight a few things about the context of this story. First and foremost, it's important for us to understand that these characters who are in the boat, a good number of them had been seasoned and experienced fishermen. I mean, they were used to the sea. And in this story, some Bibles give us figures. They say, you know, the disciples rather, had done like 4 miles by the time Jesus is coming to meet with them. By the time Jesus is coming to join them. They had done 4 miles. Now, those who understand the geography of that region will tell you that that sea that is talked about there is about 21 miles at its widest. It's about 21 miles wide. And they had just done 4 miles. For how many hours? From around 6 o'clock when Jesus had instructed them to get into the boat and cross to 3 a.m. That's about how many hours? About 9 or so hours. 9 hours, they had just done 4 miles. Normally, if there was no storm, they would have gotten to the other side by probably the 4th hour or the 5th hour. But it's 9 hours and they are not yet halfway the sea. And they were seasoned fishermen. And some of them probably began to remember, remember so and so, because it was a small fishing community, and Israel was a small nation. And I'm so sure that some of the fishermen there knew of, like other 20 fishermen who had died under the same circumstances they were in and drowned in the same sea. They were like, this looks like that thing that happened to Simon and others. The other boat that capsized. Is it the other one that capsized? This was like a trouble spot. Similar to Sachangwan, in Kenya. In a place where there is accidents. And I'm so sure some of them remembered some of the funerals they had attended of fishermen who had died under similar circumstances they were in. And more still, one of them reminded them, by the way, remember the other boat, they never recovered the bodies. So this was a difficult situation for them. In fact, some of them were beginning to wonder, as Jesus assigned us to some watery grave today, were we so pathetic that he has condemned us to die at sea? Now, the most challenging part of this story is not even the storm. It is the fact that it is Jesus who sent them to the sea. And Jesus, you cannot tell us you did not know that there's going to be a storm. The way we have looked at you, the way you operate, you must have known there's going to be a storm. See, you claim to be God. You must have known. Jesus must have known there's going to be a storm, yet he sent them into the storm. Turn to your neighbor, tell him, Jesus can send you to the storm. It was he who gave them the instructions that they were going to meet on the other side. I'm so sure they began wondering, are you sure we heard God correctly? Are you sure he said this sea, or he meant the other one, the Dead Sea? Did he know that there will be storms tonight? Doesn't it feel like that sometimes when you embark on an assignment that you're so sure has been sanctioned by God, and you're so sure God is in it, and then things begin to become hard, and things turn thick or thick? Probably you got into that relationship prayerfully. You prayed. You sought God. You went to some prayer retreat center for 3-4 days to seek the Lord. And God even gave you a name. Gemstone. And you are so sure it is Gemstone or it was Scholastica. And so you hooked up with Scholastica. But 2 months down the road, you're driving each other up the wall. And you're like, God, did you really lead me into this relationship? Probably you felt God was instructing you to do some assignment, and then it landed you into deep trouble. Probably you walked in obedience to God at your place of work, or in your family, or where you live, and now everyone is against you because of what you did. You chose not to lie about that process, about that situation, about that job, and now you're being fired because you are too honest and you're messing up for others. Probably you got dumped because you opened up your life to your wife-to-be and you told them, chances are I may appear on deadbeat because I have a little boy in Turkana. And they're like, what? You have a Turkana baby or a baby in Costo? I'm dumping you. Jipange. You got into trouble because you are doing the right thing. You're following, you're obeying God. You are giving your tithe, and now things are thick because you started walking in obedience to God. Allow me to share a little story about me and my family. About 7 years ago, my wife and I felt God was instructing us to come back to Eastlands in Nairobi to minister. But then we had moved to the other side of Nairobi. I was pastoring as a youth pastor at Nairobi Chapel on Ngong Road. And we used to live off Naivasha Road, aka Satellite Riruta. Naivasha Road. And it was okay. I mean, it was okay. We were on the good side of Satellite. But then there was a season when my wife began to feel a strong urge after about 2 years of living. About, not even 2 years, about several years, because before that we were living in Kabete, we moved there. For several years of staying on there, my wife began to feel, no, we must go back to Eastlands. We need to look for a house in Eastlands. Even if we're going to be operating from Eastlands, we'd rather do so. And I was like reluctantly, agreed to that. And she put me under a lot of pressure to do so. You know that song, pressure, oh, pressure, 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 ya nini. I mean, I felt that. I felt pressure. I felt that guy a bit, but my wife is okay, good lady. And so I gave in, and one weekend we decided to come over to Eastlands and look for a house. And so house hunting, we checked out houses, and I was, dismissing houses for any flimsy reason because I didn't feel the whole vibe. I was like, it has a blue gate. Blue is... that fence, Kayaba fence, that neighborhood, there's a Mirage shop next door. I don't want that house. And so I was dismissing houses for any flimsy reason, that, I don't like the faces of the guys who are coming out in and out of the building, things like that. And so we went back, after spending almost a whole Saturday of house hunting. Then, guess what? On Tuesday, when we are reporting back to work, get a text from my boss, from my senior pastor. Please make sure you see me by 9 a.m. in the morning. So I rushed to his office. Then after we have, exchanged niceties about how the weekend was, out of the blues, he goes, Chogo, would you mind going back to Eastlands? I was like, are you guys on the same WhatsApp group with my wife? Hey, I thought, have the powers conspired? And he said, you know what, Pastor Chogo, we have one of our churches in Eastlands that needs a pastor. Mashariki Church needs a pastor. The pastor was transitioning. And so would you mind going to fill in the position? And so we talked, and then he told me, you have a week to get back to me, because we had talked previously about other plans that I felt I needed to get into moving forward as a pastor. He said, if you feel like continuing with the other plans, you can tell me, but if you feel like you can take up this challenge, I give you a week. I told him, Pastor, you don't need to give me a week. Over this weekend, me and my wife felt, now I decided to be the one who felt that we should go, I hear God sometimes, felt that we should go and look for a house in Eastlands. Am I in the spirit or what? I didn't care to say it was my wife who felt so. Many times she's the one who is more in the spirit than me. Then, I was like, we don't need a week. Tell me, what do you want me to do? And so we were instructed, and so we began, transitioning from being the youth pastor at Nairobi Chapel and began coming to Mashariki Church in Eastlands. We loved the crowd when we came to visit it for the first time. My goodness, young people, vibrant, energetic, singing. And the church used to meet at a club in, Jam Rescue on Jogorod, at a little club there called Club Venus. I mean, it was just so cool. And we were like, yay! Then the time of transition came. And the pastor had to go and had to remain with the crowd. Let me tell you, the first 3 or 4, since now we are sure God has led us. In fact, we even felt we should come and look for a house. Remember that story? We were now sure this is of God. Let me tell you, the first 3 Sundays, I don't know what happened. I think the first 3 Sundays, half the people, I think a quarter of the crowd that we found there did not like my face. They disappeared and never came back up to today. Then the following 3 Sundays, I think they did not like my voice. Another 15% disappeared. And then, like a month into my being the pastor there, Club Venus, the management of that, establishment decides to close down that club and put down the building and renovate and put up something else. And so we are given a 1-month notice. God. And then we looked for a place. God knows we walked and looked for a nice place. But the best we could get was this place. And by then it was not looking the way it was looking. It was another dingy place. I'm telling you, there were no toilets. There were no windows. I mean, the place was, and I tell you, I made a mistake of coming. One Sunday I decided we're going to come the entire church to this place and check out the place. I think about the other quarter that looked at the place and they decided there are better places to worship God. God is spirit, and those who worship him don't have to worship him in such a place like this. They followed the words of Jesus and moved on. Now I was left with like half the crowd that I found there. And by the way, there were still a few serious tithers who had remained with the crowd. But then there was a significant number of serious ones who had gone with the other crowd. So our finances plummeted down. They went south. At some point, we were so much in debt and we couldn't pay. I began asking God questions. And then before I could get answers, It was December, elections, 2007. And guess what happened after that? Post-election violence. By then, our church used to have a lot of orange, colors. And so some people decided, this church, we don't feel you. And so a certain number moved on. So come January, we had like 3-4 rows of people, one service, 2008. And I asked God, are you sure you are the one who laid it in the heart of my wife? Now I was no longer in the picture. Are you sure you are the one who led us to come back to Islas? Because this doesn't look like the leading of God. It got terrible because at some point we couldn't even pay salaries. We used to go and pay statutory deductions and there's no salary. And it was survival at that point. And difficult. And I really cried to God and wondered, God, in fact, I would go and pray and believe God that probably on Sunday, about 50 visitors are going to come and visit the church. I would release those visitors. Father God, I release them from the east, from the west, from the north, from the south. But then God, having a mind of his own, decided to visit us in his own ways. Because sometimes God comes through, but not the way we expect. The first way God came through in a way that we did not expect was through our landlady. She had graciously allowed us to be here, but by that time we were now like in 3 months, arrears. We had not paid because we didn't have the money. So when she came, I knew she's coming to tell us, look for another place. But when she came, we had a meeting here. I was with Sam Kibara and other people. We had a meeting near that post with the landlady. And we were humble, we knew, man, we are done for. Then she says, Chogo, thank you so much for how you spent time with my daughter. Long time when I asked you to pray with my daughter. She's now doing fine. Thank you so much. Then she asked, this rent, is it difficult for you to pay? Is it too much? We said, yes, not disrespect, but yeah, it's a struggle. So how much do you want to pay? Now, most of us here have never heard such words from your landlord, and you will never hear them. She said, how much do you want to pay? We whispered to it, because we never expected that. And I said, 40,000. He said, then that's okay. We will change. I was like, why didn't I say 25? Jesus Christ, you'd have told me. And she said 40. Then the next statement was amazing. She said, you know what? So what do you plan to do with the arrears? He said, we'll try and pay the arrears. She said, you know what? Don't even pay the arrears. I'll pay the arrears for you. My goodness. And then she bought us lunch. Hey, that was now the icing on the cake. God came through, but not the way we had expected. And when we were coming to Eastlands, we thought, man, we have so many friends in Eastlands, the church is going to fill up within 2 months. I mean, we had many friends, and we thought people will come streaming in saying, Richie, you're back in Eastlands, yay! Guess what? A few of them trickled in. And half of the few who trickled in did not like the way I preached. And they went away. But guess what? God began to come through people we never knew. And some of them began to help us. Some of them would go out of their way to say, Pastor, what do you need? Some of them would pay. In fact, there's a time some of them were paying rent for us because we were struggling to pay rent. I mean, people we had never known prior to coming to this church. Because God sometimes comes through in ways that we don't expect. It can be roller coaster because you're expecting him to come through the conventional means, but then he comes like a ghost. So turn to your neighbor, tell him, relax. God will come through, but maybe not the way you are expecting. You're trusting God for a child, and it is several years since you married and you've not been able to get a child. You just don't know how God is going to come through for you. He will come through, but maybe not the way you are expecting. And so, here we are. So many months down, so many years down the road, and God has come through. And God has used some of you that we never expected. Some of you, when you came into this church, you were not even Christians. You were far from, serious Christianity. But then you embraced Jesus. And you quickly, began to engage. And some of you have become phenomenal leaders in this church. I think you should clap for yourselves. God comes through. Hey, in as much as I would have loved God to come through for Mashariki in certain ways, He chose to intervene His way. And sometimes, friends, we must allow God to be God and to just do His things the way He has to. Sometimes, have you ever come across these parents who, when the children begin to play around and do, funny things, they're like, stop being a child. So what do you want them to be? They are children. And sometimes it's good to let God just be God. But sometimes God has a mind of His own. His ways are above our ways. He doesn't think in the same wavelength as we think. A few learnings that I caught, and also from the story that we've read. Number one, I've learned that God doesn't have to come through in the way that I expect Him to come. He doesn't have to. Because in our story we read that somewhere in the middle of the sea, somewhere in the middle of the night, when they had struggled to keep the boat afloat, then suddenly, in a way that none of them expected, Jesus, like a ghost, comes walking. And so for some of you, probably that letter, warning letter, and you think you're finished, probably that lady who dumped you and you think now it's over and I will never get married. I told you that there's a time I was dumped. I ever told you that story, and I went to the church and cried, oh God, I shed tears. Hey, God. But then God knew what He had in store for me. Amen. God can come through in unexpected ways. Probably that storm is a setup for God to come through for you in an unexpected way, at an unexpected time, with an unexpected blessing. Unexpected way, unexpected time, unexpected blessing. There are 4 other lessons I want to quickly draw from the story of the disciples in the storm. Number 1, we must learn to have defiant trust in God. Defiant trust in God. Defiant. Defiant meaning you're looking at circumstances and they're telling you otherwise, but you're saying, no, it doesn't matter what you say, I'm still going to trust God. I'm still going to keep rowing. In as much as I don't understand why, Jesus, you instructed me to do this and things are getting thick. You instructed me and I'm trying to be a good wife here to obey you, but my husband is getting worse. I'm still going to keep rowing. Keep rowing. Defiant trust in God. Now, something about defiant trust in God is that there are moments when God will tell you some things in the light of day. And then night comes on your life. And some circumstances begin to conspire with the darkness of the night. And you're tempted to doubt what God told you during the day. Ladies and gentlemen, defiant trust tells us that don't doubt in the dark what God has spoken to you in the light. Don't doubt in the dark what God has spoken to you in the light. Learn to defiantly hold on to your trust in God and to what God has told you, even when circumstances point otherwise. Number 2, do expect challenges when on God's assignment. Do expect challenges when you are on God's assignment. Friends, I wish I could guarantee you that when you begin to serve God, when you begin to follow God, it's going to be a walk in the park, and you're going to enjoy. Oh, it's going to be wonderful. Oh, double. You know, I wish I could guarantee you that, but I can't. Because sometimes God will send you on assignments where it will not be double. It will be half, like it was for me. I mean, things can begin to be thick. But even in those moments, don't get it twisted. God is in it. God is not only with us when things look nice and fluffy. Even when the ride is rough, God is with us. Number 3, don't sail alone. Don't sail alone. Sail with others. Sail with others. Thank God there were 12 in the boat. They must have encouraged each other. Come on, it's your turn to row. And you know, now it was Thomas's turn to row. He was doubting, but he was rowing. Now it was time for Philip. And Philip was asking questions, but he was still rowing. You know, it was time for Peter. And Peter was, you know, denying that he's supposed to row. He has ever been a fisherman. I've never been a fisherman. But he was rowing. Don't sail alone. You need the encouragement of others. By all means, avoid, turn to your neighbor, tell them, by all means, avoid Lone Ranger Christianity. We have experiences in this church that we take people through, and one of the things that we have designed these experiences for is we've designed them to connect you with other people. When you sign up for Mizizi, which is a 10-minute experience that connects you with purpose, with God, with purpose, and with other people, it connects you with people that encourage you along the way. We have Simama. It connects you with people whom you open your life to, and they begin to be, your group that encourages you and helps you to go through therapy and healing. You need people. We have life groups in this church. And these are communities that meet in different places in the course of the week, where they meet to encourage each other, challenge each other, and be there for each other. Don't be a lone ranger. Sign up for these things or join a life group. Connect. Don't just come to church and take off after the service. Connect with people of God. Don't sail alone. Turn to your neighbor, tell them, don't sail alone. Find people that you can connect with. If you're not in this church and probably you're watching us on TV, you can look for a church nearby and connect with people there. But don't sail alone, because you will need the support of good friends when you're beginning to do things for God and it begins to be thick and challenging. Don't let your work, your priorities, your plans, your choices isolate you from others. Even when you make mistakes, in this church, we say, even when you make mistakes, don't go and hide at some corner because you know now you've made a mistake. Come, we still love you. And we cannot allow you just to walk alone. We will look for you. Allow us to walk with you. Because we all make mistakes. And lastly, friends, don't be quick to jump into conclusions when God doesn't seem to come through your way. When God doesn't seem to be giving you your dream job, When God doesn't seem to be giving you your dream, your ideal, woman to marry, don't begin to jump into conclusions that probably God is not able to. Probably He's just coming through to you in ways that you don't expect. Often people run into troubled times, and they begin to let go of their precious faith. I plead with you, don't make that mistake. Don't make that mistake, brother. You know what? One of the interesting things about this story is the story of Peter. Because Peter, once he recognized that it was Jesus coming, if you had taken Peter and, took him to a retreat center and gave him 3 days to dream, tell him, Peter, dream of the things you're going to accomplish in this life. Dream anything. I can guarantee you, even if you gave him a week, Peter would have never dreamt he will at one time in his life be the only man up to that point who had walked on water. But because he was part of the crew that obeyed God and got into a storm, that storm set him up to experience what he had never experienced before. Turn to your neighbor, tell him you just don't know what that storm is setting you up for. For some of you, probably you will get fired. You just don't know what that storm of getting fired will set you up for. You just don't know what being dumped will set you up for. You just don't know. I don't sound like a good pastor at that point, yeah? You just don't know what being evicted from that place will set you up for. The storm set up Peter for an experience that no one had ever dreamt of. Good people, if we hold on to our faith in the midst of that storm, you just don't know what you could end up pulling off with God. Probably it is something historic that has never happened in your family, that has never happened in your village, that has never happened in this country. When God comes through in a way that we don't understand, let's have defiant faith. I want us to listen into a song that, as I was preparing this message, I remembered that song. Now, this song is not the kind that you're used to today, because nowadays you're used to all sorts of interesting songs, asusu, suji what, tam 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 tam, and all that. But this is one of those classic songs. When I want to think soberly, I listen to these kind of songs. Most of you don't know the gentleman who sang this song, but his name is Steve Curtis Chapman. And Steve Curtis Chapman, inspired by the story we've read in Matthew 14, came up with a song. And the song says, sometimes God does not come the way we want. Sometimes He comes in the cloud. Let's listen and watch.
These are the places I was so sure I'd find Him. I've looked in the pages and I've looked down on my knees. I've lifted my eyes in expectation to see the sun still refusing to shine. Sometimes He comes in the clouds, and sometimes His face cannot be found. Sometimes the sky is dark and gray, but some things can only be known. Sometimes our faith can only grow when we can't see. Sometimes he comes in the clouds. Sometimes I see a sailor out on the ocean, so brave and so sure, as long as the skies are clear. But when the clouds start to gather, I watch my faith turn to fear. But sometimes he comes in the clouds, sometimes his face cannot be found. Sometimes the sky is dark and gray, but some things can only be known. Sometimes our faith can only grow, but we can't see. So sometimes he comes in the rain, and we question the pain, and wonder why God can seem so far away. Time will show he was right there with us. And sometimes he comes in the clouds, sometimes his face cannot be found. Sometimes the sky is dark and gray, but some things can only be known. And sometimes our faith can only grow, but we can't see. So sometimes he comes in the clouds.
Sometimes our faith can only grow when we can see.
He comes in the
Father God, help us to appreciate that you have a way of doing your things. Sometimes it may not be conventional. Help us to still trust you, even in those moments. Help us to still trust you. Amen. Please stand up on your feet as I declare God's blessing. As others are being prayed for here, allow me to declare God's blessing over your life. As others are being prayed for, you can stretch your hands towards me. As I pray, I declare God's blessing. And now may the God of peace, who is the author and the giver of peace, who brought again from among the dead our Lord Jesus Christ, the great shepherd of the sheep, by his blood, the blood that established an everlasting covenant. May he strengthen, complete, and perfect each one of you. And may he make you what you ought to be. And as he does so, may he equip you with everything you need, everything good, that you may carry out his will and live in the way that he desires you to live. And while he equips you and completes you, may he continually work in your life, in your businesses, in your place of work, in your families, and accomplish that which is pleasing in his sight. Through Jesus Christ, the Messiah, to whom be glory forever and ever, ages upon ages. And the church says, Amen.